1965. Off Diamond Head, a 40-foot sloop crosses the Transpac finish line first, all the way from Los Angeles, with a sailor named George Griffith aboard. Her name is Psyche. Hull number 3, fin-keel, spade rudder hung out on its own at the back, a flat bottom that surfs the Pacific swell like nothing before her. She is a Cal 40, laid up by hand in a shed in Costa Mesa, California, and she is the best ocean racing sailboat America has ever built. 7 years later, she is finished, not sunk, not out-designed, not bought by a villain who wanted her dead. The Cal 40 erases itself, twice. And the first time, the men who built her call it the best news they ever got. The man in that shed is Jack Jensen. Nobody raids his company. No rival beats his boat on the water. The fastest hull of her generation talks the whole sport into banning boats shaped like her. And then Jensen's own company hands itself to men who have never once smelled resin cure in a mold. The deadly mistake looks, on the day it happens, like the day Jack Jensen finally made it. If you owned one of these in the 60s or 70s, you already know the feeling this story is about. The tiller alive in your hand, the stern lifting as a wave takes her, the log needle climbing past hull speed and just staying there, the whole boat gone quiet and fast at once. You were holding something the newer, heavier boats simply could not do. That is the boat this is about, and this is how her own people gave her away. To see how it happens, go back to a fiberglass shop in Costa Mesa in the late 50s and a man who bet on a material almost nobody trusted yet. Jack Jensen builds boats out of glass and resin when the rest of the industry still builds them out of wood and doubt. He founds Jensen Marine in 1957. His first real product is a little centerboard cruiser drawn by a naval architect named Bill Lapworth, the Lapworth 24. It sells. Jensen keeps hiring Lapworth to draw more. Then, around 1962, a racing sailor named George Griffith walks in with an idea sketched, so the story goes, on the back of a napkin. Griffith sails out of the Los Angeles Yacht Club, and he is tired of heavy, narrow boats that plow through the sea instead of riding on top of it. He wants something light with a long waterline and a flat run aft that picks up a wave and surfs. He takes it to Lapworth, who turns the napkin into a real design, and they shop it around the California builders. Every one of them says no. The boat is too radical, too light. A fin keel with the rudder hung way aft on its own, separated from the keel by open water, when every prudent offshore boat of the day carries a long keel with the rudder bolted to the back of it. One builder after another passes. Then they show it to Jack Jensen. Jensen looks at the drawings and says yes, on one condition. Griffith has to guarantee the sale of 10 boats before the tooling starts. Griffith guarantees the 10. They are gone before the first hull is even out of the mold. That first boat is called Persephone, and the men rigging her in Costa Mesa have no idea they are building the boat that will make the company famous. And in the same decade, help talk the sport into killing it. Here is what makes her different in the numbers a boat owner respects. She is 39 feet, 4 inches on deck, with a 30-foot, 4-inch waterline. That waterline is roughly 10% longer than her rivals of the same length, and a long waterline is free speed. She weighs 15,000 pounds, about a quarter less than the boats she races against, with 6,000 pounds of lead in the keel, light, stiff, and long, flat on the bottom, hard in the bilges. Everything the careful men said was dangerous. Then hull number 3, Psyche, sailed by Don Salisbury, wins the 1965 Transpac outright, first overall, across the whole fleet, all the way to Honolulu. The yachting world stops laughing. If you have ever owned a boat that earned back every dollar you put in her, laid her up yourself over a winter, and trusted her offshore when the forecast turned, then you already understand these people and what they had. Do me one favor before the story turns, because it is about to turn hard. Subscribe, and leave the name of the boat that did that for you in the comments. Half of what gets made here starts as somebody's comment about a boat exactly like this one. The Cal 40 does not win because she is lucky. She wins because Lapworth is right, and every builder who said no was wrong. Downwind, in a building breeze, she surfs. The heavy boats bury their bows and sit stuck at hull speed. She climbs onto the wave and runs away from them. In the ocean races of the middle 60s, she is close to unbeatable. She takes the Southern Ocean Racing Conference down in Florida. She wins races to Bermuda. She fills the Transpac starting line with her own kind. And in 1966, 14 Cal 40s enter that race, the biggest one-design fleet the Transpac had ever seen, a record that will stand for almost 40 years. Bill Lapworth, the quiet man who drew her, ends up in the National Sailing Hall of Fame partly on the strength of this one hull. And this is the part that still gets me. A boat this good is a marketing machine no amount of money can buy. Every trophy is a brochure. Costa Mesa cannot build them fast enough, and the whole Cal line under her, the smaller Cal 20, the Cal 25 that ordinary families can actually afford, all of it rides the halo of that 40-footer winning oceans. Before it is over, close to 18,000 boats will wear the Cal name, and almost every one of them sells a little easier because of what Psyche did off Diamond Head. Because right at the top, at the moment the Cal 40 owns the sport, two things happen that end her, and both of them are dressed up as success. The first one comes from the race course itself. The Cal 40 is so fast, so consistently, under the handicap rule of the day, the Cruising Club of America rule, that she breaks it. She wins so completely that people start to blame the boat for the rule. If one design can clean up every ocean race, the handicap system is not working, so the sport moves. It abandons the American rule and adopts a new international one, the IOR, shaped by European ideas about what a proper offshore yacht should be. And the new rule is not kind to a flat, beamy, light hull that surfs. Under the IOR, the very things that made the Cal 40 a giant, the light displacement, the long flat run, become penalties. The boat that beat everyone gets measured by a rule book written, in part because she beat everyone. Production winds down. By 1972, after fewer than 200 hulls, the Cal 40 is out of production. She did not lose a race. She won so hard, the sport changed the rules so a boat like her could not win again. That is the first way the Cal 40 erases itself. The design was too good for the world it was born into. But a great company survives one boat going out of production. Cal was more than the 40. What Cal could not survive was the second decision, and this is the one that actually ends the company. In the middle of the 60s, while the Cal 40 is still winning everything, a conglomerate called Bangor Punta comes to Costa Mesa with a checkbook. Understand what Bangor Punta is, because it matters. It is not a boat company. It starts the decade as a merger between a bankrupt Maine railroad and a Cuban sugar operation. Then it just starts buying. It buys Smith & Wesson, the revolver maker. It buys Piper Aircraft. It buys Starcraft. It buys the O'Day Sailboat Company for under $1 million in stock. It buys snowmobiles. In 1965, it even makes a run at Harley-Davidson, a hostile takeover the motorcycle company has to fight off. By the end of the 60s, Bangor Punta is a Fortune 500 conglomerate, ranked number 326, with more than 10,000 employees. Revolvers, airplanes, sugar, and sailboats all sit in the same annual report, and a man in a New York office decides how much each one is allowed to spend. In 1966, Bangor Punta buys Jensen Marine for $6,660,000 in cash and stock. Jack Jensen, the fiberglass pioneer who bet on the napkin when everyone else passed, sells the company he built. On the day it happens, it is a triumph. The little Costa Mesa glass shop is worth millions. The founder cashes out. Everybody shakes hands. That is the deadly mistake. Not a crash, a handshake. Because the moment Cal becomes a line in a conglomerate's ledger, the decisions stop being made by the people who lay up hulls. They start being made by people who read spreadsheets and who cannot tell the difference between a boat that will still be racing in 50 years and a snowmobile that will be landfill in 5. A boat brand runs on the judgment of boat people. Bangor Punta ran on quarterly numbers, and a Cal 40 and a revolver looked the same on the page. Watch what Jack Jensen himself does next, because a founder votes with his feet. He does not stay and grow old inside the conglomerate. He leaves. He goes off and starts another sailboat company, Ranger yachts, and even builds a line of motorhomes in the old Costa Mesa plant. The man who guaranteed the Cal 40 exists walks away from the company that carries the name. The soul leaves the building, and the checkbook stays. And here's the part that is easy to get wrong. Nobody in that New York office is a villain twirling a mustache. They are reasonable men making reasonable calls. Trim a little cost on the layup. Standardize a fitting across the line. Share a supplier with O'Day, the other sailboat brand they bought the same year, and squeeze the price. Every one of those decisions, on its own, is defensible on a spreadsheet. Add them up over 10 years, and you have quietly built a cheaper boat with the same proud name on the side, and sold it to the exact buyers who chose that name because it was never supposed to be cheap. No single day looks like the day it died. That is what makes it a tragedy instead of a crime. For a while, it does not show. The molds are good. The reputation is enormous. Under Bangor Punta, Cal keeps stamping out hulls, and thousands of families get onto the water on a Cal 20 or a Cal 25 who never could have otherwise. On paper, it looks like the acquisition worked, but nobody in the building is measuring the thing that is actually draining away, which is the reason a person paid extra for a Cal in the first place. The winning, the founder, the idea that this was the boat the smart racers chose. That does not show up on a spreadsheet until it is gone, and by the end of the 70s, it is going. The order book thins. The conglomerate that bought everything now has to manage everything, and a marine market that boomed does not boom forever. When the numbers tighten, a conglomerate does what conglomerates do. It consolidates. It looks at a plant full of skilled glassmen in Costa Mesa, California, and it sees rent and payroll, not 50 years of knowing exactly how thick to lay a hull. In January of 1981, the Cal operation is pulled out of Costa Mesa and moved across the country to Tampa, Florida. Read that again if you know boats. You do not move a hand-built boat company 2,000 miles and keep the hands. The men who built the legend, who could feel a soft spot through a deck shoe and knew every quirk of every mold, most of them do not move to Florida. The name goes east. The knowledge stays west and scatters. A boat is only ever as good as the people laying up the glass, and Cal had just left its people behind in a parking lot in Costa Mesa. The rest is quiet, and that is the cruel part. There is no dramatic sinking. Bangor Punta itself gets swallowed, absorbed into a larger corporation in 1984, and Cal becomes an orphan brand inside a company that was inside another company. The boats get cheaper to build and less special to own. The magic that Griffith sketched on a napkin and Lapworth drew and Jensen bet the shop on is now a trademark in a filing cabinet. By 1989, it is over. The Cal name goes out of production for good, not with a bankruptcy that makes the papers. It just stops. The way a brand stops when the last people who cared about it have all gone home. That is the second erasure, and it is the one the thumbnail is about. Nobody murdered Cal. Cal handed itself to people who could not tell a legend from a line item, and they quietly filed it away until there was nothing left to file. So walk down any serious dock today, and here is what is left, and it is not what you would expect. The company is gone. The boat is not. Go to almost any club race in America and count the masts. You will still find Cal 25s on the starting line and Cal 29s cruising the bay, boats built by a company that has not existed since before some of their current owners were born. Bangor Punta is a footnote. Piper and Smith & Wesson went their own ways, and the sugar and the railroad are long gone. The boats that were once just one more line in that conglomerate's ledger are still out on the water on a Saturday morning, still doing the exact thing they were drawn to do. The Cal 40 became a cult, the very thing that killed her racing career. That flat, light, sweet sailing hull turned out to be a nearly perfect boat to own for a lifetime. Stan Honey, one of the finest ocean navigators alive, owns one, and it is his line that the whole cult repeats. She has no bad habits. She steers with a light tiller when almost every boat her size needs a wheel. She surfs when you want her to and forgives you when you need her to. She was cinematic enough that a Cal 39, her close cousin, is the boat that gets rolled and sunk on camera in the 2013 Robert Redford film All Is Lost, decades after the company that built her was gone. The brand died. The hull was still good enough to star in a movie. They are so loved that they almost never come up for sale, and when a good one does, people pour years and, by Latitude 38's own reckoning, up to $250,000 into restoring a boat that first sold for a fraction of that. A Cal 40 won the Newport to Bermuda race, one of the classics, as recently as 2022, 60 years after the design was drawn. Now, if you go looking for one, keep your head. My own money says the Cal 40 is one of the great buys in classic sailing, but only with your eyes open. She was built light on purpose, which means the plywood bulkheads were kept small, and the tabbing that holds them to the hull was kept thin. On a boat this old, that tabbing can let go, and bulkheads soaked by decades of deck leaks can rot. The rudders have been known to fail with age. The hull-to-deck joint is bolted under that pretty teak tow rail, and the fasteners can suffer crevice corrosion where the water sits. The engine is its own adventure. The earliest Cal 40s came with an atomic 4 gasoline engine, later ones with gray marine diesels, and the last with the Little Perkins 4 108 diesel that owners actually trust. By now, almost every survivor has been repowered at least once, so you will find every kind of engine and drive under that cockpit sole, and the honest sellers will tell you exactly which and when. None of that is a deal killer, it is a survey list. Every one of those is findable and fixable, and a Cal 40 that has been kept up is stronger now than the day she left the mold. But go in knowing that a 50-year-old race boat is a boat you maintain, not a boat you neglect. And before you fall in love, make 2 phone calls, one to an insurer and one to a marina, because a hull past a certain age scares both, and that conversation is a lot cheaper before you buy than after. Here is the thing I keep coming back to. Cal did everything right on the water, and one thing wrong in the boardroom, and only the boardroom mistake was fatal. The boat was so good it changed the rules of the sport. The company was so successful, it sold itself to people who never understood what they had bought. The hulls are still out there, still surfing down waves, still winning the occasional ocean race, outliving by decades the conglomerate that owned them, the rulebook that retired them, and the founder who walked away. The Cal 40 is the rare thing that got erased on paper and refused to disappear in the water. Now, if this hit the way I think it did, there is a story that is almost the exact mirror of it. A company that got the price and the marketing exactly right, outsold Catalina and Hunter, put more families on the water than anyone, and then made one design decision that sailors are still arguing about to this day. Same era, same market, the opposite mistake. The tragic fall of McGregor is on the screen right now. Just click the video that is appearing, and I will see you in there.